All right, ready to dive into a story about faith, family, and those crazy things fate throws our way.
Always up for a good story.
This one's called Joseph the Sabbath Observer, passed down for generations, originally told in Hebrew.
Those stories always have something to say, don't they?
They really do, and this one really gets to the heart of what truly matters.
What's it all about, then?
So we meet two characters, two totally different worlds. First, there's Joseph, a devout man. Might not have much, materially.
But rich in other ways, I bet.
Exactly. His faith, his family, that's where he finds his riches.
Makes sense. And I'm guessing the other character is?
His neighbor, wealthy, comfortable, finds his security in possessions. Right from the start, it makes you think, where do we place our own sense of security? The things we can hold or something more?
It's a question that's echoed throughout generations, isn't it? And I'm guessing the Sabbath plays a big part in this story.
Huge. It's more than just a day off for Joseph, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. In Hebrew, it's Shabbat, a sacred space and time. It's about disconnecting from the material world and reconnecting with what matters. Family, community, spirituality.
Yeah.
Like hitting the pause button on the daily grind.
And the story paints such a vivid picture of how Joseph gets ready for Shabbat. Imagine him in his simple home, but his face is lit up, almost like a kid in a candy store.
It's those little details that make these stories come alive. You can practically feel his excitement.
Totally. And it's not just about the big things. It's how he approaches every little task, even the mundane stuff, with this sense of purpose, this joy.
You can tell his faith is woven into every aspect of his life.
It's true. It's not a chore. It's about infusing his life with meaning. Like, the story even mentions how much he's looking forward to finding a special fish for the Shabbat meal.
It's about savoring the anticipation, finding joy in every step.
And now for the mood swing. Imagine being that wealthy neighbor, living a life of comfort but completely eaten up by anxiety.
What could possibly have him so shaken?
Well, let's just say he got a little visit from some fortune tellers. And let's just say they didn't tell him he was going to win the lottery.
Fortune tellers. Now that's adding intrigue to the mix. What do they tell him?
They dropped a bombshell, told him he was going to lose everything, and get this, it was all going to end up in the hands of Nod. You guessed it, his neighbor Joseph.
Oh boy. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Right. So while Joseph is finding so much joy in his preparations, his neighbor is sweating bullets, terrified of losing everything he's worked so hard for.
It's a classic clash of values, isn't it? One finding security in faith, the other in possessions.
And guess what? Fate has other plans. Their paths are about to cross in the most unexpected way. Okay, picture this. It's market day. The whole place is buzzing.
Total sensory overload.
Colors, smells, people everywhere, vendors hawking their goods.
And amidst all that are two characters, each with their own agenda.
Right. It's like two completely different worlds colliding. You've got Joseph, in his element, completely present.
Lost in the moment.
Squeezing those tomatoes, smelling the fresh herbs. He's on the hunt for the perfect fish for his Shabbat table.
You can practically see the joy in his eyes. Yeah. He gets it. True wealth isn't about stuff, but about appreciating these simple pleasures.
And then there's his neighbor. He's on a completely different kind of treasure hunt. Haunted by that prophecy.
You're driven by fear.
Exactly. He's not looking for fresh produce. He's trying to outsmart fate itself.
Convinced that if he can just convert his wealth into something small, something easy to hide, he can cheat the prophecy.
So while Joseph is bargaining for fish, his neighbor stumbles into the fanciest jewelry shop in town.
Talk about a contrast.
I know, right? He's begging them to sell him the most expensive pearl they have, like this tiny little object is going to protect him from ruin.
It's amazing how their purchases reflect their mindsets, don't you think?
Completely. Joseph, with his limited means, is willing to spend a good chunk on this fish. It's about abundance, celebration, sharing with his family, and the neighbor. He's so fixated on what he might lose.
It's like he's isolating himself from the very things that could actually bring him joy. Connection, generosity, faith.
And of course, irony of ironies.
What's that?
As they're leaving the marketplace, Joseph, with his heart full, the neighbor clutching his pearl for dear life.
A storm hits?
Out of nowhere. And not just a sprinkle. We're talking torrential downpour, crazy wind.
Yeah.
And guess what happens? As the neighbor is rushing across this bridge, wind whipping around him, a huge gust comes out of nowhere, snatches the hat right off his head.
No way. The hat with the pearl?
The one and only. Talk about adding insult to injury. He's watching his big plan, this expensive pearl, all swirling down the river with his hat.
It's almost too perfect, you know? Like a lesson in letting go and not pinning all your hopes on something so small.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are we trying to control so hard? And what happens when it all blows up in our faces? Literally, in this case.
And as if things couldn't get any more ironic, Joseph's about to stumble into his own surprise.
Oh, this is where it gets good.
While his neighbor's battling the elements, Joseph's heading home from the market, his basket full of goodies, and he bumps into these fishermen. They've got a fish. A big one.
Like, biggest fish I've ever seen. Big.
Let's just say it's the kind of catch they tell stories about.
Yeah.
A once-in-a-lifetime kind of fish.
So what's the problem? Too big to sell.
You got it. No one can buy it before it goes bad. Remember, no refrigeration back then.
So much bounty, but in a way, it's almost worthless.
Almost. But that's where Joseph comes in. His heart full of Shabbat joy, thinking about that meal with his family, and he sees this fish.
No way. He goes for it.
He does, even with the cost, which for a man like him had to be a big deal. But he says it beautifully. For Shabbat, there's no such thing as too expensive.
That's amazing. It's about values, not just extravagance. Okay, so picture him now, walking home, this giant fish practically dragging him down, his family waiting.
It's the perfect image. The warmth of the home, the Shabbat candles, that feeling of anticipation, and then this incredible symbol of abundance right in the middle of it all.
And here comes the real kicker, right?
As he's preparing the fish,
What does he find?
a pearl. More beautiful, more valuable than the one the neighbor was trying so hard to hold on to.
Let's talk about a mic drop moment. The wealthy neighbor, after all that, ends up with nothing but wet clothes, Joseph. He gets a pearl, a feast, and the joy of Shabbat with his family. I think we know who got the better deal here.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? Where do we find our security? What truly enriches our lives? Sometimes the greatest treasures are found not in what we cling to, but in what we share.
Absolutely. It's a story that stays with you long after you've heard it. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. What are the pearls in your own life? The things that bring meaning even when the storms hit?